From this computer. Lorna, good afternoon. How are you?
Hi, doing well. How are you?
Awesome. Thanks for jumping on this call. Appreciate it.
Oh, I'm always happy to.
Awesome.
Yep,
Awesome. Lorna, tell our audience or tell my audience, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
sure. So I'm Lorna Erickson. I'm the co-founder of Expert Interviewers, and we exist as a company strictly to help train interviewers and make them be more confident, efficient, equitable in their hiring processes. And that is the number one only thing that we train. So we're very niche focused. So we can partner with any kind of hiring manager, whether it's technical or non-technical roles. We do live in-person virtual trainings. We also have an online course
Yeah.
and community to help support our learners. We've done this across the US, across Canada, and globally as well.
Okay. When did you launch your business?
Oh man, well, we'd been, my partner Victoria and I, we had this like creative spark going on for
Yep.
years.
Yep.
And it was finally, I think in 2002, excuse me. So it was, no, sorry, in 2020, get my years mixed up. Yeah,
Okay.
in 2020, it was when we were sitting around during COVID, be like, now's the time. So we started kind of gathering information, started posting content. And luckily, a lot of people needed this information. So we've been
Okay.
rolling since then. And I've been full time with the business, I quit
Amazing.
corporate last December. So it's been a few
Awesome.
months. Yep.
Perfect. So essentially what you're doing is you're working with hiring managers to help them during the interview process. So you'll go in because a lot of hiring managers struggle with this. What questions to ask, what not to ask. How do you
Right.
find the best talent? So you'll work with them, you'll coach them to find the best talent by asking certain questions or
Absolutely. So we
awesome.
focus on the talent assessment component,
Okay.
whereas you focus on the talent acquisition piece. Like you're
Yes.
the person helping them to find the candidates. We're
Yep.
helping them to properly assess them. So
Awesome.
even before they meet candidates, we'll work with them to identify what they're actually looking for,
Yep.
what the right answers are to those questions, how to interpret candidate answers, what
Yep.
a good interview process looks like. So we'll coach them a lot before they even see your candidates that you send them, but we make
Perfect.
sure that with our training, they're going to treat your candidates really great.
Perfect. So the reason
Yeah.
why I want to talk to you so much, and I think a lot of people are going to watch us and they're going to take a lot of value from this because a lot of candidates that I speak with are going to interviews and they just can't get a job. They don't understand what hiring managers are looking for. They're
Right.
confused when they're answering because interviewing can be tricky. I know a lot of hiring managers ask really tough questions. So on today's call, I
Mhm.
want to find out from you what hiring managers typically look for, maybe what things can a candidate say to win or influence them to get hired. So I have a series of questions that I want to ask you. So we'll dive right into it.
Great. Sounds
Awesome.
good. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So, Lauren, this is what I want to ask you. Do you work with HR managers?
Yeah. Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. So my niche is HR. I recruit HR professionals in the Toronto area. My niche and a lot of the clients that I work with are HR professionals, HR managers, HR candidates. So,
Yeah.
okay. First thing, from your experience, where are companies finding talent right now? Do they place a job out on LinkedIn? Is it referrals? Like where
Oh, man.
where are companies finding talent?
You know what's interesting is I don't work with the candidate side as much, so like the
Okay.
sourcing component. So I'm curious, I'm going to turn that question back around to you.
Oh,
Where are companies finding talent?
companies are finding talent from, well, LinkedIn's a big part of it. I
Yeah.
think organizations, one of the LinkedIn's exploded, but they'll go on LinkedIn and they'll place a job ad and wait for resumes to come that way. They'll
Yeah.
work with search firms like me. They'll find candidates that way. Referrals, a lot of companies have a referral program, so they'll get referrals, word of mouth. So those are the three things that I
See,
think
that's
organizations are
great.
finding talent, but
And that's
it's always hard to find good talent, right? It's really, really
totally,
hard. And you would
yeah.
think because there's so many candidates out there.
Right. Yeah. Well, I love hearing your perspective on where these candidates are coming from because that's a part of it. And then that's like one of the biggest differences between our businesses. It's like
Yeah,
I get an opportunity. We work with the same clients, like we have the same people as our
yeah,
clients. The
yeah,
difference is you're the one that's getting, I mean, that job sounds really hard to me. I mean, I used to do it back in the day,
yeah,
but you have the hard job of finding that talent. And it's interesting to hear you mention those three places is where you get them from.
yeah. So like you said, mentioned, I'm on the front line. So I'm the middleman between the client and the candidate. And so I'm sourcing. A big part of my day is sourcing and screening and looking for talent, and it's tough. Like this is why organizations struggle. That's why many organizations don't scale, is because the talent will take you as far as the talent's going to take you to your next levels. If you
Right.
don't have top talent, you're not going to grow and you're not going to scale. So
Totally.
right,
Yes.
so you need
Yeah.
you need it's critical that an organization has top talents,
Hmm.
and that's going to take you to your next level. So
Right.
it's imperative that you have talent. So
Absolutely. And to add on to that too, I understand that like interviewing is typically such a small portion of somebody's job, right? They're not interviewing, most people, hiring managers are not interviewing for 8 hours a day, all day, every day,
they're
right?
not.
But the people that you hire are going to make a very big impact on your job, right?
Yes.
That just goes to show the importance of this tiny component of your job is going to either make or break the success of your projects and your
Yep.
relationships with your clients and your employee morale. So it
Yep.
has a really big ripple effect, and it's so important to take care of that interviewing piece.
It's critical.
Yeah.
There was a candidate that I was speaking to last week. She says, I was in an interview and the hiring manager asked me, "What are you feeling right now?" He literally
Hmm.
stopped the interview and said, "What are you feeling right now?" And I was like, I didn't know how to answer that. Was that a trick question?
Right.
So some of these questions, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of it, hiring managers ask really odd questions, either
Yeah.
to throw you off, just to hear what you want have to say. So what are some questions that hiring managers typically ask, or some weird ones?
Well, when we get a hold of them, we teach them not to turn interviewing into a therapy session. How are
Okay.
you feeling right now? Right.
Yeah.
And one thing that I've been talking about quite a bit lately, it just keeps bubbling up. I jokingly kind of call it the golden rule of interviewing. If it would be weird if a candidate asked you as a hiring manager, then don't ask them. Can you
Right.
imagine a candidate turning it around and being like, "How are you feeling right now?" Right? That would
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
weird,
It'd be
right?
weird.
So as the interviewer, don't do that to the candidate, right?
Yeah.
So we're teaching them to ask job related questions
Okay.
about your skill set and or the things that you have liked and disliked about previous positions. So that's how we're preparing our interviewing managers to stay focused and to
Okay.
maximize their time with candidates.
Okay. Can you share with me or share with us, what are some common questions that hiring managers, can you speak of that? What are some common
Sure.
questions that hiring managers are asking to
Right.
candidates?
So the hiring managers that have been partnering with expert interviewers with our company, they're
Yep.
going to be asking questions. I always form any kind of evaluation around two things. One, can the candidate do the job? And two, do they want to do the job? Now,
Mm,
I'm going to focus on do they want to do the job? A lot of hiring managers totally forget this part, but the people that have been through our expert interviewing training and program, they are going to spend half of the interview seeking to understand your previous preferences. So they're going to be asking candidates, hey, what did you like about your last position? What were your favorite components? What were
okay.
aspects of your last position that you didn't like? And you go through and ask similar questions. Interviewers should be asking similar questions related to how they were compensated. What did they like and dislike? What was their manager like? What management techniques did they like or dislike about that? What was
Okay.
the pace of the work? What did you like and dislike about that? So it's like slowly extracting preferences so that the interviewer can help the candidate to decide whether or not they're actually going to like this role that they're interviewing for. And
Okay.
then, of course, the second component, can they do the job? Yes, they will be asking behavioral questions. Can you
Okay.
walk me through a time when?
Okay.
So I never, like, never say never. 99% of the time, I do not give candidate advice because I'm a coach for interviewers, not candidates.
Yep.
Um, but if I had that 1% of the time, any advice that I'll ever give for a candidate is just to simply write down any challenges that you had in your last position,
Okay.
write them down, what the situation was, what you did about it, and what was the end result. If you have all of those written down,
Yeah.
you'll likely have an example when an
Yeah.
interviewer asks you to walk you through a specific challenge.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Client companies are also looking for, they want to determine when they are hiring hard skills and soft skills. Would you agree?
Um,
What's your thoughts on that?
You know, it's interesting because I don't necessarily categorize things as hard skills and soft skills. When
Okay.
I hear soft skills, what I now hear are what we call competencies.
Okay.
And so I make interviewers define what that actually means. So it's, we need the person with this soft skill. great, but what does that mean in the actual job? If somebody has this specific quote unquote soft skill, what actions will they show you in a challenging situation? So
Okay.
we don't necessarily define them that way, but I kind of boil it down to competencies and like technical assessment and knowledge. That's kind of how we coach them to form their questions.
Okay. So
Yeah.
not to look for hard skills or soft skills, more or less focus on the competencies.
Competencies, technical components, and then motivators. Those are the
Okay.
three most important. Yeah.
Okay. Is there, Lorna, in your experience, is there one thing that stands out above all that there's what you've seen or what you've experienced? Here's the one thing that organizations really are looking for. The top, your top. Is it attitude? Is it culture fit? Is it like what is it the one thing that you can say stands out that organizations are really typically looking for? Or is there
You
one thing?
know, a common a common competency that I see a lot of companies asking for, they always start off with saying like they just have to deal with the unknown, right? They have to be able to have the competency of like dealing with ambiguity when things aren't just perfect and laid out in structure. In
Yeah.
my mind, it sounds like interviewers are commonly asking for people who have proven experience working through new difficult situations.
Okay.
Um, that's one of the most common competencies that interviewers are asking for. How to
Okay.
ask that, how to determine that, how to find that.
Okay.
So,
You find
yep,
that's one thing that they're looking for.
yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yep,
I asked you this question. I want to talk about social media.
yeah.
Are you finding that hiring managers are before they even bring a candidate in, are they looking at their social media presence?
I would say probably.
Okay.
I would coach them not to.
You'd coach a company not to look at their social media.
I would,
Why?
yeah. Because then they're just starting to absorb all of these very natural unconscious biases about somebody. Have you noticed? I mean, sometimes I've heard companies like try to look when resumes are submitted, they don't want somebody's name on there either. They just want to see just the resume so that they can just look at what the resume is for itself. Once you start throwing in people's names, and some people even back in the day, I don't know if they still do this. You can probably speak to this, put pictures on the resume, right?
Yeah, I still see it not
Do
often, but
you?
it happens. Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Um, I think that starts to naturally trigger unconscious biases in interviewers' minds. And instead, I would recommend them to not stalk them on social media and online, and instead just interview them and see what comes up during the interview and try to
Okay.
explore their professional background. But that would be
Okay.
my advice. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm curious to know, what do you think about that? I mean, you send candidates
Yeah,
to
so
companies and clients everywhere. Do you notice that happening?
yeah, I think it's happening. Like I look up candidates on like I'll Google their name, see what comes up,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I just want to share a story. Years ago, I
Yeah.
remember I was working with a client in the West End of Toronto, and they were looking for an HR generalist. So we
Okay.
submitted a couple candidates, and one of the candidates went in to go meet with the HR director. HR director, after the interview was completed, called me and said, I met with Lorna. She was fantastic. We want to bring her back to another round. So we want to, go move forward with her in the interview process. So I called Lorna and I said, Lorna, great news. Your interview went really well today. You hit a home run. They're going to bring you back for a second interview. She goes, well, I don't want to go back for a second interview.
Mm.
I said, why not? I go, they love you. You're so interested in the company. And she goes, I actually looked up the hiring manager on Facebook.
Hmm.
And as a result, I don't want to align myself with that type of person. So
Okay.
the HR director at the time had an open Facebook profile, which
Okay.
anyone could see. And
Yeah.
the candidate, her name's not Lorna, I'm just kind of, but Lorna
Right.
looked her up and said that she saw a picture that she didn't like. And I said, I
Hmm.
do not want to align myself with the director
Yeah.
like that, an organization that represents themselves that way.
Right.
So organizations are looking at candidates, but it's a two-way street. Candidates
Right.
are looking at the organization, determining whether they want to be part of that organization or is there an alignment with their
Yeah.
values,
Right. Sure. It can
right?
absolutely go both ways.
It could go both
Um,
ways.
as it should, right?
Yeah.
In my mind, I think that one of my biggest pet peeves about the industry is unbalanced power dynamics in interviewing. I just think that they're very unnecessary. It's like we're supposed to be meeting to see if we're a mutual fit for each other. What I would find interesting is if that candidate, could ask the right kind of questions in the interview to determine whether or not there really wasn't alignment there, right?
Okay.
Just like the same way I would challenge interviewers if they happen to look at somebody's Instagram or Facebook or whatever it is, I would challenge the interviewers to interview the candidate and try to see if any of, these characteristics
Yeah.
come up in professional situations. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's an interesting story though.
Yeah, and then I'll never forget that. And I was shocked because again, I looked at her profile. I was like, oh my God, I can't believe she posted that. But it's an interesting conversation and an interesting debate.
Yeah.
And you discourage companies to looking at people's social media.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
don't
I
need
just
to
think
bring.
it's
It's
one
not fair.
extra step of unconscious bias for no reason. And
Okay.
instead, let's just evaluate the candidate on, professional work experience. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, listen, I believe this. I believe have conversations with people, kind of because sometimes social media muddies the waters. You don't really, it kind of muddies the waters, social media, right? So I have conversations with people regardless, right? I'm always open to
Right.
having conversations, and I think that's what recruitment is all about: is having dialogue and conversations with candidates.
Yeah.
Let them share their story, let them give them an opportunity to show them themselves and share their side of the story, right? So
Right.
yeah,
Well, I was while you were saying that, I was thinking about the opposite of this is like right now we're focusing on the negative components. Like you see somebody and you're like, wow, that person's not aligned. Well, what about the other way where
yeah,
let's say I look up somebody and they played soccer, they have a family with two young kids,
yeah,
and they support their local women's sports. I'm like, oh, wait a second. Like this person is like me. Like they're going to be amazing,
yeah,
And when they come into interview, I already have this blanket, this halo effect, they
yeah,
call it,
yeah,
bias, where
yeah,
I'm like, God, they're great. And that's oftentimes where we see the biggest hiring mistakes is when people hire people that remind them of yourself or someone else that was similar in the job, and it's
yeah,
not the same person. So instead, keeping that unconscious bias aside and then just focusing on the interview and the job, it helps to keep that process a little bit cleaner, leave space for diversity.
yeah.
So it can go both ways, it can go both ways.
Hiring is so tricky. It's so right. Like you said, companies hire people they similar to themselves. That's common.
They certainly can. Yeah, they
Yeah,
certainly can. And you see that for some companies, right? It's like the
yeah,
same types of people in all levels of leadership. You're
yeah,
like, how did this happen? It's like,
yeah,
I know how it happened. Like they're
yeah,
just hiring people that are like them,
yeah,
which is
yeah,
understandable. But when managers are ready to step out of their comfort zone and learn to manage people who are different than them, that's where real growth can happen,
yeah.
for not only themselves professionally, but for the company too.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Laura, the clients that you're working with, when they are seeking talent, they naturally, I think they post job ads, right? And they wait for resumes to come in. Is that kind of how, right?
Yeah, I mean that, or they can work with recruiting partners, and
Yeah.
yeah. Mhm.
I'm convinced, and I want to get your opinion on this. So what I'm seeing on LinkedIn, these job ads are getting 200 to 300 resumes per job posting. I'm
Oh,
convinced, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this. I don't believe that the hiring manager is opening up all the resumes.
oh yeah.
Do you believe that?
No, I'd be shocked if they were. I'd be shocked if they were. I
Yeah,
mean, speaking as like in a former life of mine, like I was a recruiter,
yeah,
right? But being a recruiter or TA professional, they're the ones that are opening those resumes, right?
yeah,
But the hiring manager is far removed typically from that process.
yeah,
Uh, my goal working with these hiring managers is to make sure that the partnerships between them and their TA professionals, the recruiting partners, that is so that's a great alliance so that they actually know what they're looking for,
right,
right? So the TA teams, they're the ones that are all day, every day, up to their knees in applicants for these advertisements.
yeah,
Um, they're the ones that have to accurately screen on the front end. And that
yeah,
communication between the hiring manager and the recruiter, that's
yeah,
on me to help train them to
yeah,
make sure that that's in line so
yeah,
that they're accepting the people they should be and letting the other candidates go that aren't aligned know as soon as possible.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is tricky. Like I said, we're seeing like just so many candidates applying to, I think what they're doing is they're using a technique called spray and pray, where they're just sitting at their desk, spraying their resume out to hope to all these open jobs and
Mhm.
praying that an employer calls them and waiting for that call, right? So,
Right.
and that call is like, I'm convinced that these hiring managers, and no fault to them, just again, they're flooded. You can't open up all the resumes. It's just the volume is there, and it's resume after resume after resume. It's like,
Yeah.
so I always, when I'm talking to candidates, I encourage them to network, be active
Good.
on LinkedIn, and provide quantitative numbers on their resume. Do you,
Sure.
right? Do you think hiring managers want to see that on a resume when you work with? Do you think this is what they want to see or what they're looking
Yeah.
for on a resume?
Right. I think that you're giving great advice for candidates. I mean,
Yeah,
it sounds like it. I'm not a if I were a candidate, hearing those things would be really helpful and like tangible actions to take.
yeah,
From a hiring manager standpoint, I just feel like they're further removed from the process. And I think recruiters and TA professionals, they like to see it because it's a good jumping off point for them to start their screening process
yeah,
when they see actual numbers on a resume. So yeah, I
yeah,
think that's great advice.
yeah. I think, and like I said, like provide quantitative numbers on a resume. It really
Yeah,
helps you stand out from the crowd, right?
sure.
You
So
know,
you as, I mean, as a recruiting partner to these clients and these companies, like when you get a resume
yeah.
that is aligned, like what's different about when the people reach out to you and you're like, yeah, this is somebody I need to send to my client. This is somebody that I could definitely stand behind. Like, what are they doing different
On the resume, or
on their resume or the way that they reach out to you?
you
The
know,
way that they get noticed for, for you to notice
one
them.
thing I was giving this some thought. When I get when a candidate calls and say, "Hey, pass me looking for an opportunity," I
Yeah.
love confidence. I love a confident candidate. Like, I've got 10 years of HR experience. I've led TA teams. I've led HR teams. I've got a global. Like, I love confidence. That's really, I can hear it in their voice that this person's confident. They understand where they are, where they're going, and what they want to do. That to me,
Sure.
okay, this is a really good candidate. They're confident. They've grown. But when I hear a candidate that's not so confident, I don't get too excited about that candidate.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
confidence plays a really big part in whether, and I'm not that I'm not going to represent you. I will represent you, but when I get on
Right.
the phone and I hear a confident person, that gets me, okay. We got a really strong candidate here, right? And I can
Cool.
skill
Yeah.
market that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's
So
interesting.
candidates
Appreciate you
candidates
sharing that.
need to be confident,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they have a
right?
skill set for a reason, right? They
Right?
should,
Like I spoke to someone this morning. She was fantastic. She was like great. Knew what she wanted. Knew where she was going. She knew this is my compensation. This is my ideal location. These are the type of roles that I'm looking for,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So
yeah.
confidence plays a big part in it, right?
That's great to
Um,
you. Yeah.
Lorna, do hiring managers, companies, in your opinion, from what you're seeing,
Mhm.
cover letters, is anyone reading them? Do your clients read them?
No, no,
Okay.
no is the short answer. But what I will say, if it is a job that requires
Yeah.
a lot of written communication, sure,
Okay.
they'll take a look at it, right? Because that's like a
Okay.
free piece of work that they could see. Now, if it is something that requires no professional written communication whatsoever,
Can you give me
nope.
an example? Can you give me an example? Like, give me a
Sure.
role that,
If somebody's like in like PR or marketing or um gosh, I'm drawing a blank for any other like written communication. But PR and marketing are the two that come to mind first and foremost. Then those employers might want to see a written example.
yeah. Yeah.
But if somebody is like a software engineer or with something in a lab or something like that,
Yeah.
mechanical design engineer, not likely do they need to see that.
Do you think, Lorna, two candidates at the end of the finish line, we've got two candidates. We don't know
Mhm.
who to pick from. One candidate A wrote a really great kick-ass cover letter. Candidate B did not. But we don't know who to pick. Could a
Right.
cover letter, in your opinion, be the deciding factor at the end? Say this person took the time to write a great cover letter.
Right.
They went the extra mile. Do you think an organization or hiring manager could that be a deciding factor?
I would hope not. I would
Okay.
hope not.
Okay.
Could it happen? Sure,
Okay.
but I would hope not. It's interesting when we talk about like comparing candidates, I always say that companies and interviewers should never compare candidates to each other. Instead, you're comparing them to the requirement, right?
Yeah.
So if you compare candidates to each other, let's say that they're both underqualified. Like here's the line for qualification. They're both down here and one's slightly more qualified than the other. It doesn't matter. They're literally both under the qualifications for the job. So don't
Okay.
hire the best of the worst, right?
Okay.
Start over again and find somebody that's actually qualified for the job.
Right.
Um, but if you have two people that are equally qualified for the job, above that qualification line, then it's a matter of thinking through where are we going strategically. Each of these people has what we need right now for our current team. Where is this position going to go and who is better aligned for that?
Okay.
Right. So that's my main philosophy on how to compare candidates.
Okay. So that's
Yeah.
your answer on that. Next question I have, and I've got a whole bunch of them. So,
Oh,
thank
great.
you letters. Do hiring managers want to see them? Do you think they want to see them? Is that important to send a thank you after the interview, or are they reading them?
Yeah, I totally think that interviewers are absolutely reading them. They are. Um, and I'm going to take a slightly different twist on this. I always think that anything we expect out of candidates, we can expect out of interviewers too.
Okay.
I don't think it should be so weird for interviewers to send thank you letters, right? And these candidates are taking time away from their current jobs, potentially, away
Yeah.
from their families, away from their lives.
Yeah.
So like I think interviewers can send them too. So I think they're great. It's just a common courtesy to say I appreciate your time and focusing
Yeah.
on us. And
Yeah.
um, so yeah, that's my twist on it.
That's your twist on it. Okay. I
Yeah.
think my
What do
opinion
you
on that.
think? Yeah.
Yeah, I think they are credible. I think sure, a thank you letter can make an impact.
Right.
It can I don't see how it can hurt you. So sure.
I yes, I
It can't
completely
hurt,
agree.
right?
And even to
Now,
throw in a few reasons why, it's like, thank you. And
yeah,
also, I'm qualified because of these reasons. Or from the interviewer standpoint, if you really like a candidate,
yeah,
to send that candidate a thank you letter and say, hey, here are the things that I think would align with
yeah,
your preferences and our job. I mean, talk about like cementing the deal. Like that's gonna, who else is doing that? Like very few interviewers are doing that. That would
yes.
make you stand out as an employer.
I've never heard of an employer sending an employee or a candidate a thank you for coming in. It was great. I've never seen that. It's more common for the candidate to send
Right.
the organization a thank you. But I want to go back. It can hurt you if you do not have proper grammar. So if you hit
Oh
that
yeah.
send and
Right.
there's a mistake somewhere,
Sure.
uh, you are toast. So I say before you hit send, proofread the resume because although
Yeah.
your intention is to say thank you, but make sure it's well written.
I think attention to detail is always important, but let's
Yeah.
hope it's not a deal breaker for anyone, because that's a tiny component of it. But yes, attention to
Lorna
detail is always
is
important.
important. I saw years ago, I was working with a client and she discounted a really good candidate because of a spelling error on a resume. And I said,
Mhm.
we're discounting really good talent here. And she said,
Right.
if they don't have attention to detail, I don't want them on my team. I said, I think that's being a little harsh, right? She goes, no,
Yeah,
these are my expectations.
sure.
So I
You know, it,
understand it, but
yeah,
I also see the other side of it. There's human error. People make mistakes,
I completely agree with you. Yeah, I
right?
completely agree. And I guess it does depend on the job. Having a lowercase here or there, if it's not life or death in a job, I think it's probably okay. Like those are things that can be coached and taught. But I do get it for some jobs. Yeah.
Laura, hiring managers can be extremely harsh and very what's the word that just they know they yeah, they can be harsh. They can be harsh at
Yeah.
times.
Particular, finicky, all the
Yeah.
things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I understand why I get it, but
Yeah.
when you have a really good good candidate, I think some things need to be overlooked and right,
Sure.
right,
And then again, to flip things around, like what if the hiring manager sent an email to the candidate and there was a typo in there, and the candidate calls them back and says, hey, I'm sorry, hiring manager, I can't work for you. I noticed your typo.
very
They'd
good
be like,
point.
what? And like,
Very good
that
point.
sounds crazy, right?
It sounds crazy. Yeah, very
So
good point.
I'm trying to constantly seek balance within the interviewing process and
Yeah.
help to acknowledge the power dynamics that are existing. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lorna, ghosting. Why is ghosting happening?
Oh, ghosting.
Yeah.
In my opinion, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this because again, you're on the front lines. In
Yeah.
my opinion, ghosting happens because of unpreparedness and indecision, which all links to being unskilled, right? They don't have the tools they need by they, I mean hiring managers, interviewers, they don't have the tools that they need to make an efficient interviewing process.
Okay.
So they may not be having the right conversations internally about finance. Can we actually pay this person? They're not
Yeah.
having the right conversations with their hiring manager partners,
Okay.
their teams, to have everyone be on the same page. And it just all kind of stems from that unpreparedness and decisiveness, which means that they don't have the skills to be able to do it. So that's personally what I think ghosting happens and where the
Yeah.
main hiccups happen in processes. What are you seeing when you're not hearing back from clients? What's happening?
So well, I can speak. So this is my thoughts on this. Many candidates, they'll go for interviews and they
Mhm.
just never hear back from an organization,
Okay.
right? I have a couple theories and a couple ideas on it. One is just, again, internal recruiters or internal HR professionals, they just don't have the time to get back to everyone because there's just so the volume is just so much, so they can't
Mhm.
possibly get to everyone. So that's one. They just don't have the time to get back to everyone. Secondly, they just don't feel like it's important to get back. It's just not a priority for them, right? If
Sure.
if if
Yeah.
we're interested, we'll get back to you. If not, this is this is part of it. I've just come to, and I share this with client candidates that I'm working. It's just part of it. So don't
Yeah.
beat yourself up. Don't overanalyze it. It's the ugly part of the recruitment process. I
Right.
don't I don't
Right.
agree with it. I try, me personally, I try and get back to everyone. I think
Right.
if I can give you some feedback from my clients, I definitely will give that to you.
Sure.
Because I think that they take the time to
Yeah.
go and meet with these clients, and they drive
Mhm.
down there, they get their best suit or whatever. So at
Totally.
least you can give them some feedback, right?
I completely agree. And I think
Right?
the piece that I like to bring to candidates in those scenarios, I'm putting clearly all the blame on the unprepared hiring managers, the indecisive, the unskilled hiring managers. And the old saying, like it's not you, it's them. Like it's not the candidates, it's the hiring managers.
Yeah.
And it's not a problem for the candidates to fix.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's a big issue that hiring managers and companies need to
Yeah.
set a higher standard for
Well,
sure.
we talk about the candidate experience. It speaks
Yeah.
of culture. It speaks of the
Yeah.
candidate experience. It needs, that area of recruitment really needs to get better. And so many candidates are frustrated with it. So that area of HR needs to improve. But do you coach your hiring managers? Hey, get back to these candidates. It's critical that you do. Like, do you
Yeah.
share that with them?
Absolutely. Part of the preparedness on the front end before they even see candidates is to decide who is on their interviewing team. Are they actually available when you're interviewing, right?
Okay.
It's like
Yeah.
if you say we need to hire somebody in 3 weeks, cool. All those interviewers that you just mentioned, are they actually in town?
Yeah.
Do they have big client meetings that they're going to skip out for, and then somebody else has to jump in on the interview, and then it extends it further and further and further? Um, and then are the right conversations being had with finance to make sure that we have the funding to hire this position? So it's all about making sure that you can stick to the timelines that you said you could. That's what we help to coach them for, is that preparedness. And honestly, candidates have first impressions too, right?
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
if you're coming in and not showing that you're prepared, and this is your first impression with them, they're going to be wondering what kind of show you have going on internally if you
Yeah.
can't even get this one meeting right.
Agreed.
So yeah,
Agreed.
it's a huge focus there for candidate experience.
Lorna, have you worked with a company that said, "Hey, Lorna, we've interviewed 30 candidates for this role. We still can't find what we're looking for." Have you
Mm.
ever encountered that?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have you?
So
Have you?
yeah,
Oh
yes.
yeah, I bet you have.
And
Yeah.
I think sometimes the more candidates you see,
Yeah.
it makes it worse. I think
Yeah.
they like I've worked, and I want to get your opinion on this, where I've worked with a company, we've interviewed 20 candidates, we're still not finding what we're looking for. Well, let's go back and look at these 20. What was missing? And I
Great.
think
Yeah.
sometimes hiring managers are so indecisive.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they found what they're looking for, but they're afraid to pull the trigger. They've
Right.
gotten burned, or
Yeah.
so. There's one client that I work with. He'll keep interviewing. They're just interviewing. I go, you're missing out on great talent. And I
Right.
think the root of it is just because he's got burnt and he's so scared to hire.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Lack of confidence is such a big glowing theme and so
Yeah.
many of these bad processes, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
So not knowing the talent when it's in front of you. And it all kind of like it all kind of like rolls together. It's like they're probably not asking the right questions in the first place to get the
Yep.
answers they need to make a determining factor. And then to move it back even one step further, they didn't have a clear definition of what they're looking for in the first place. So how in the world can they possibly identify it if it's sitting in front of them?
Right.
So I hear you on that, and I totally agree that there's a lot going on there,
It's
but it stems from the lack of confidence and lack of ability, and skill.
and not being prepared. You said not being prepared. They're not prepared.
Right.
So
Right.
so is having a job description enough to be prepared? Is that enough or no?
No, it's not. I think it's a really solid starting off point. When I work with hiring managers and hiring teams, the first thing we need to do is actually define what they're looking for. And it's okay. Like I do let them start off with this fluffy terms, right? It's like we need somebody that's a hard worker. We need somebody that can hit the ground running. We need
Yeah.
somebody like that's totally fine. The only issue with that is that everyone is going to have a different definition for success. When somebody says a hard worker, you and me and them and everyone in the room is going to have a different definition and
Yes.
standard of what that actually means.
Yes.
So the part that people, hiring managers typically miss is taking that a step further and actually defining that success and saying, okay, let's take these from the adjective world. Let's move this into the verb world. How does somebody in this specific job show us that they're really good and that they're a hard worker? How do they show us? Let's
How do
talk
they
through some of that.
demonstrate? How do they demonstrate that?
Yes. Yeah. So we got to get all of those verb statements out of that.
Yeah.
And then from there, we reverse engineer that into situational questions. We can reverse engineer that into motivational fit questions. But
Okay.
if you're not taking all those tiny granular steps,
Yeah.
there's no hope. Like there's
Yeah.
really no hope. It's just going to be a crapshoot of
Yeah.
that person feels good. Let's hire them.
Yeah.
Or
Do
let's
you,
interview 20 more people.
a lot of organizations hire on gut and they hire on feeling. And I have a
Right.
good feeling about this candidate. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is, but I got this feeling. Is that enough?
No, it is
It's
not
not
enough.
enough.
It's going to be there no matter what. I'm not here to take people's gut feelings away from them because I'm a firm believer outside of an interviewing room. I'm a very firm believer in gut feelings and I listen to my gut feeling all the time, but
Right.
it's such an unreliable, statistically, such an unreliable way of hiring. So
Yeah.
instead, it's my job to give interviewers tools to have actual job related things to evaluate candidates on,
Yeah.
so that they
Yeah.
can counterbalance those biases.
You made a video about that. Remember
I
that video
probably
you made a
did.
couple weeks ago about the gut feeling and then the gut feeling left? You remember that
Oh,
video?
that's right. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it was a leprechaun one. I was like, oh,
Yes.
feeling, I'm so glad you're here. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden, gut feeling was, well, it was gone. And you're like, oh, completely unreliable.
Yes.
It is.
Laura,
Good
that's why I
memory,
connected with you. This is why I connected with you. I started watching your videos. You started popping up on my feed, and I go, she's hilarious.
Oh,
It's such a,
thank you.
yeah, it's such an interesting twist on recruitment and interviewing process. So I think your content is great. So keep doing it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's a fun creative outlet for
Yeah,
sure.
I think people need to laugh. I think
Yeah,
we're stressed out as it is, right?
I
So
agree.
so
Yeah,
laughter's great. I love like
I
this,
agree.
right? Lorna, panel interviews. Are you in favor of
Yeah.
panel interviews? Are you against it? Do you believe one-on-one interviews is the best?
You know, I I know I know that companies like panel interviews, right?
Mhm.
And um it's interesting because if I were to be doing it, I would just say let's do some one-on-one interviews because I don't necessarily like to make candidates feel more uncomfortable than they need to. I
Mhm.
want to having a set of three or more, God forbid, eyes on one candidate to answer a question, that's nerve-wracking for
Yeah,
anyone,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I think that there are better ways to determine how candidates react under pressure than having five intimidating sets of eyeballs on them,
Okay,
right?
give me an example. Do
Oh,
you
of
think of
better ways
something?
to identify
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Well, I would first ask interviewers to tell me what kind of pressure are they going to be under in their job. Give
Okay.
me an examples of the challenges that are going to come up in this position. So
Yeah,
we write all of those challenges down. These are going to be high pressure situations where stakeholders have a tight deadline, whatever it is.
yeah.
Great. Write all those down specific to the job, whatever their job is. And then we reverse engineer that into situational questions where a candidate has experienced that in the past to see if one, they've experienced it, and two, if they've ever done anything about it.
Okay.
Because maybe they've experienced it, but then they hid under their desk and didn't do anything, So
Okay. Yeah.
so that's how we determine the quote unquote very vague term that we're determining right now is under pressure.
Yeah.
So panel interviews, if companies want to do that, I can help them support that process, and make it work for them. But if I were to make a recommendation, I would just say let's just have some one-on-one conversations,
Yeah.
to see if we mutually align. Do you see a lot of your companies having panel interviews, and like if they do, like what step is that in the process?
Yeah, it's really on a case by case basis. I've seen so many different things. Like most interviews are like one-on-one. The initial one is one-on-one, a phone screen or a Teams, and then the
Yeah,
second one may be with the hiring manager and another member of the team.
yeah,
Uh, Panel interviews, maybe I've seen them more. It's more common, I would say, more in the government space, or
interesting.
more like when I've worked in this education field, like in that space there. But for the most part, it's usually one-on-one is common, and
Okay,
I think it's the best way. Then there's other kind of tools that companies use, like McQuake testing, like that sort of online assessment to make the best decision. So at the end of the interview
interesting.
process, they will send out like a testing to help them determine who's the best candidate. So
Okay.
yeah.
Not to get too off topic here, but I'm curious to know, how do you feel about assessments? And from your recruiting perspective, how do you feel about assessments for the candidates
Uh,
you're presenting?
I don't know. I can make arguments that they're great, and I can make arguments that they're not so great. So I don't know. I kind of sit on the fence with them.
Interesting.
There's
Yeah.
one client that I work with that lives by them. That like, no, we
Yeah.
only hire based on our interview process and based on what the assessment says. If the assessment
Interesting.
says yes, then we hire. If we don't, so I don't know.
Ooh,
It's so
yeah, they
tricky,
put a lot
right?
of,
It's so
yeah,
tricky, right?
it
So
is.
I
Yeah,
go by
interesting.
gut. I go by gut, Lorna. I listen to
Yeah.
my gut. No, no,
I get that.
I've listened to my gut in the past, and it's. I just want to go back to that for a second. It has gotten me in trouble, so I don't think listening to your gut is the best way to
Yeah.
hiring a candidate.
It's
You
going to
are
be
correct.
talking to you no matter what, but you might as well have some actual information to analyze.
Yes.
'Cause either way, it's going to be chatting you up.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Yes. Yes. Lorna, I'm gonna wrap up. I just want to say thanks for your time.
Yeah, this is
And
great.
I'm
It's
gonna
always fun to talk to you. I
Yeah,
love it.
yeah, and keep the great content. Oh, your Christmas one was great too. That video you made with the elves at Christmas time.
Oh, yes.
That was good too.
Anyone that has to have an elf on the shelf in their house could have
Yeah.
related to that one. But yep, it's always fun.
What inspires you to make these videos? Where does it come from?
You know, this is the funniest thing. As I'm falling asleep or trying to,
Yeah.
they're placed into my brain, and then I
Uh,
get to roll over and type them into the notes section of my cell phone, so I
gotcha.
don't forget them.
Yeah.
Otherwise, that's how creativity is. It comes in and it's gone if you don't take it. So usually I'm up till all the hours in the night just
Well,
typing them out
do
because
you
they're visiting me. So
do you sleep with your cell phone beside you?
I used to.
Yeah.
But as of the last month, I now have it in a separate room,
Yeah.
which makes it pretty hard to write fast when these ideas come to me.
I
So I'm
know. Yeah.
legit writing them down in a notebook. So
Awesome. Okay.
yeah.
Well, I'm gonna wrap up. If anyone's watching this, how can they find you? How can they connect with you?
Thank you. We are on Instagram, expert interviewers, at
Yeah.
expert interviewers. We're on TikTok at expert interviewers. And then, of course, I have my personal page on LinkedIn, Lorna
Yeah.
Erickson, and our company page, expert interviewers as well.
Perfect. Awesome. So they can connect with you through those methods.
Absolutely. I'd love to see anyone, and I can chat about interviewing anytime. It's my favorite thing to talk about.
Mine too. Mine too.
Isn't that awesome?
I
That's why we
love
get
it.
along so well.
That's right. Right. That's
Yeah.
right. So, Laura, thank you. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon. Okay.
That sounds great. Thank you, Pino.
All right.
All right. Bye.
Bye.